So, Nurit, why don't you tell me how you got involved with the Monkees? What was your
Well,
first introduction? Was it
well,
Peter Tork?
I was walking down the street in the Village in New York City, and I was sort of bummed out because I had no money or very little money. And I passed by this guy who is singing, and he's got his guitar case open, and there's money in it. So I took my last $5 and I threw it in his case and in his guitar case, and we started talking. And then he told me his name and that he was an aspiring musician. And then we would see each other in the Village occasionally. And then he told me that he was going to Los Angeles and, in the near future. And I said, well, so was I. And he said, look me up when you get to LA. And I did. And I went to see him play at, I think it was Huntington Beach, but I'm not sure. It was a beach club where he worked, sweeping floors in the daytime and singing at night. He was just a good guy. I liked him immediately. And then he said that he was auditioning for a show. That's what he said. He was auditioning for some musical show. The show was The Monkees. It was going to be called The Monkees, and right away there were a lot of people around him. When he got the monkey thing, and but Peter was always a very generous and kind human being. I will never forget him. He helped me at a time when I needed help. He was there for me. We became good friends. He kept saying to me, once the Monkees got started, they were shooting. He said, "Come on down to what was on Gower Street, wherever it is they were shooting." And I never wanted to, but I finally did go down in the first season, towards the end of their shoot in the first season. And I met David and Michael and Mickey, and John Anderson, who was the AD and who became a good friend of mine, and Ward Sylvester. I met everybody, and everybody seemed to have fun. They had what they call their Frodus room, where people went to smoke pot, which, of course, as we know, was illegal at the time. And you walked in that room and you practically keeled over just from the smell of the pot. It was a room on the set, just off the set. It's where they went to smoke pot and to relax, in between takes. I guess that's what you call it. Everybody was really very nice, and I started taking pictures. And because I was not in the union, me being just a friend of Peter's, but the producers hired a union standby so that I could legally shoot on the set.
And what would you do with the photographs?
Well, at first nothing, and then I showed a couple of them to some teen magazines like Teen Set. I remember I sold them some pictures, but mostly I didn't really do much with them. I just enjoyed taking the pictures. And then Peter, bless his heart, bought me, because I was using a friend's borrowed camera, and he bought me a Honeywell with a 50 and an 80 millimeter lens so that I could use my own camera. And, he didn't have to. He just, he offered. You need anything, he said, just let me know. And he already had about 3 or 4 people living in his house.
Who were they?
There was Bobby Hammer, Karen Harvey, and their little boy, Justin, who was a baby. It was just an ordinary house. I mean, nothing like the house that he got from the one that he bought from Wally Cox. Once the Monkees got going, he bought this great house on Shady Oak. And he had Harrison Ford build him an electric gate so that people couldn't just, drive up. And Harrison at that point was a very good carpenter, but still an aspiring actor. Great house. What can I say? It was a great house.
Why don't you give me your first impressions of each of the Monkees as you met them?
Well, Peter, of course, who was great right away. Mickey, I never really got into him very much. I mean, seemed like a nice enough guy, but Mickey had a habit of talking to you and looking over your shoulder rather than at you, at least with me. I don't know if he did that with anybody else. David, I liked very much. He was always, just friendly and nice, And Mike, well, I had an affair with Mike, but at the time, he seemed like a nice guy. He says that we met at the Troubadour when he was running the Monday Hoots. I didn't remember that at all. I only remember meeting him on the Monkee set. And Ward Sylvester, and of course Bob and Bert. Bert Schneider, I hardly ever got to know, but Bob Rafelson, I got to know, and his wife Toby, and they were all everybody was very nice, I mean, they didn't treat you like maybe you were a groupie or something. Not that that would be bad. I don't see anything wrong with groupies, but, So that was my impression of the boys. And I was very lucky that Peter gave me access, and Peter just had my name on there so I could come and go as I please. Peter was very nice to me. He was wonderful to me. I don't know why. Just in his nature, just to be a good guy. The music scene was very much centered around the Whiskey and the Trip on Sunset Boulevard and the Troubadour. And, I was always there. I ran lights and sound at the Whiskey for 3 nights a week, and at the Troubadour 4 nights a week. So I was very much in the midst of all the music, because with some people you had to rehearse. They give you their set list, and you needed low lights, romantic lights, upbeat lights. The sound was iffy. I mean, I did my best, but I wasn't a sound expert. But I liked saying good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Troubadour. Tonight we have straight from a sold-out performance, Bette Midler, it's that kind of thing. So I had my own light booth upstairs at the Troubadour. At the Whiskey, it wasn't set up quite as well, but it was also upstairs. And, it was fun. I got to hang out, and I got paid for it. So I can't complain.
So who was Ren? Now some people pronounce her name Rain, some pronounce it Ren.
She herself pronounced it Ren. It's Reine. It means queen in French. Ren, I met Ren. I guess I met her at the Shady Oak place. I don't know exactly how she and Peter connected, but they did. And Ren was a very pretty young girl, long dark hair. But, she let's just say that she wasn't that, what's the word? She didn't really take in what was happening around the house. And then she had her sister Tracy and her brother James come and live at the house for a while. James was he was a handsome, tall, skinny guy who loved to cook and bake, but never ate anything that he cooked or baked. It was all for the people at the house. He was weird that way. There were people in the hills. Sometimes you looked up and you could see somebody had an extremely long lens was trying to take pictures of Peter's house and the people that were, people that were visiting or living there.
Were the Monkees respected as musicians among their peers?
Not at first, no. They did gain some respect, but they were always thought of as a made-to-order television band, as opposed to a band that came together, naturally through working in different clubs. I mean, they auditioned for a TV show. So in that sense, I mean, but they actually, were a decent band. I'm not saying they were the best band in the world, but they were a very decent band when they played their own instruments and sang, of course. Then I had an affair with Michael, and I got pregnant, and Michael was married, and I had been married, but my ex-husband was living in New York. So I was at Peter's house, at the Wally Cox house, the Shady Oak house, during my whole pregnancy and until Jason was 1 when Peter lost the house. So there is a Jason Nesmith running around who's also a musician, and he composes for film and television.
How much interaction did Jason have with Michael growing up?
Well, from the time he was born until he was 4, he had minimal interaction with Michael, but had some. Went on trips with him and his other kids. But then when Mike moved up to Carmel, Jason did not see him for 8 years. He married a woman named Catherine Bild, who was very open to having a relationship with Jason. So, he didn't actually have an in-person relationship for those 8 years, but Catherine always sent him birthday presents and Christmas presents and always signed it from Dad and Catherine. But it was her, not Mike, that did it. Then when Jason was 12, around 12, they invited him, Mike and Catherine invited him up to Carmel, and he went there, and he started going there on a regular basis, and of course got to know the other kids, like Christian, Jonathan, and Jessica. And at one point, Mike wanted to send him to boarding school, or, had asked about that. And Jason, having heard my horror stories from when I went to boarding school, absolutely did not want to go, so he didn't. Mm-hmm. And I think even to this day, Jason has a very good relationship with Mike. He had a great relationship with David. I used to work for a company used to do commercials for a company called Celanese. This was, I'd say, 1974, maybe. And I'd go down once a month to San Diego for a weekend to be the still photographer. And Davy Jones and Linda, his wife at the time, took care of Jason. They had Talia, their daughter. They lived up off Queens Road. And they were so good to Jason. Jason learned to swim in their pool, Linda and David both were just great with him, because I was gone Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, to do these shoots. So David was also a very sweet and very kind and very gentle guy. I was just torn up when he died.
And he gifted Jason his first guitar, didn't he, David?
Yes, he did. How'd you know that? He did. He walked into our house one day when we were living on Westmount Drive in West Hollywood. And he came in, he was holding a guitar case, and he opened it up and gave it to Jason. How old would Jason have been? I think, like 8 or 9. I'm really not sure. And he gave Jason his first guitar. That's right. I forgot all about that. That was so kind of him.
This affair with Michael, was it a long running thing, or was it just a brief encounter?
Well, he got an apartment, a penthouse apartment, in that building that where Fountain dead ends into La Cienega. There's a big apartment building, and he got a penthouse there, and I moved in. And but he was very rigid about I couldn't have anybody come up there, especially not men, unless they were gay. And so I did have a couple of gay friends. I remember Jackson Browne called me a few times, but I could never invite him over because I never knew when Michael was going to be there. And so I couldn't, I had to be on the up and up, and I was, because I really cared very much for Michael at the time. I remember Rona Barrett, who was a sort of a gossip person that had a television show, said, what married monkey has a penthouse with the other woman, or something like that. I don't remember exactly. So, people knew.
Did Phyllis know?
Phyllis knew. I don't think she knew right away, but she knew. Their relationship was very, very iffy at the time that I met him. I don't know what it was like before. But obviously, Michael was ready to cheat on her, and I'm sure I'm not the only one he ever cheated with. So I would say, don't forget they came here. Phyllis had just had Christian, and they were living in Texas. And in Texas, when you knock somebody up, you marry them. I'm not saying that's why they got married, because I don't know, but the times, that's what you did in the 60s, the 50s, the 60s. If you knocked up a girl, you married her,
When did you first meet Phyllis? At what point in this story?
I only met Phyllis a couple of times, really. I remember her after she and Michael broke up. She had a boyfriend, and she came somewhere where I was. With her boyfriend, they were both dressed in tennis clothing, and she seemed quite happy. I don't remember the guy's name that she was with. But I think I only met Phyllis a couple of times.
And how did she interact with you? Was she quiet about what happened, or did she bring it up?
No, she didn't bring it up. No, it just wasn't referred to at all. And I think we didn't even really chat. I don't remember the circumstance of our meeting, but it might have been on the Monkees set, but I'm not sure.
And how long was this penthouse situation set up between you?
I'd say the penthouse, and our next door neighbor was Mark Lindsay from, what was the name of the band he was?
Paul Revere and the Raiders. Paul Revere and the Raiders.
There were only 2 penthouses in that building, and Mike had one, and he had the other, Mark Lindsay. And I remember he had this girl who was a maid, I guess. I don't know if she was a maid and plus a lover, but he had her always dress up in maid outfit, thing in her hair, a dress with frills, but that looked like a maid's outfit. I didn't find out I was pregnant for a few months, like maybe four months anyway. I moved into Peter's house on Shady Oak, big house that he had. And I had my own room. It was a circular room with a circular bed. I remember that. And Jason was born while I was living at Peter's house, and he spent his first year at Peter's house. I found out I was pregnant, and I think when I told it to Mike, he was not a happy camper, because he had a wife and 2 kids at the time, 2 boys. And, our affair was just over. It was time to move on. But since I was pregnant, I had to have some help. And Mike actually did pay for my medical care, going to a doctor and having the baby. Mike did pay for all that, but we didn't see each other at that point at all. He was back with Phyllis, and Phyllis was pregnant with Jessica.
What was the reaction to the other Monkees to this situation?
Well, I remember David I was on the set and I sat down kind of heavily. I remember this. I don't know why it sticks with me. I wasn't really showing, but I was already like 5 months pregnant. And I sat down and I remember David looking over at me and giving me that look like, I know what's happening, that kind of thing. Like he was hip to what was happening. I don't think Mickey could care one way or another. Peter was very supportive as always. So, but I stopped going to the set when I started to show. I got in touch with Mike through a lawyer and said, I don't want to, I don't want to try and get money from you, but what I do want is support for Jason. And so we worked out a thing through the lawyers where he gave me a certain amount of money, which I don't even remember what it was, to cover care for Jason until he was 18. And when Jason was 17, I remember Michael sending me a letter and saying, or the lawyer, that the money would soon stop because Jason was about to be 18. So I said, fine, I was working, that was fine with me.
And so that's when Michael's support of Jason ceased, when he was 18, and that's never been since anything?
He's never supported him since, but both Jason and Jonathan, Michael's younger son, it was Christian Jonathan, then Jason. So Michael's middle son and Jason both went to the Berklee College of Music in Boston, for which Mike paid for the school and paid for their lodgings. They got an apartment together in Brookline, Massachusetts.
So why did Peter lose the house?
I think he lost the house because, he and Mike both had the same accountant. What was his name? Anyway, the accountant was a thief, and he stole money from both of them. He didn't pay their taxes. That's why they both kind of went broke, but Peter especially. He lost the house because he had no money, so he had to give up the house. Everybody that was living there had to move somewhere. Peter moved to Venice, where he got a small house. I think he was with Barbara by then, or maybe not.
Well, he and Ren had Hallie.
He and Ren had Hallie. She's a year and a half younger than Jason. So, but they had Hallie. It's funny. Hallie was born in David Crosby's house. David was not there. There was a doctor, an MD, and a nurse there, and I was there, and I took pictures of Hallie's birth.
What do you remember about Peter leaving the Monkees? What prompted him, and did he discuss it with you?
He didn't discuss it with me, and I think what he wanted, you know, now this is just me projecting what I think was that Peter wanted to be taken seriously as a legitimate musician, and being in a pop, in a made-for-TV pop group, just wasn't going to give him any street cred, if you know what I mean. And I think that's what he wanted. He wanted to be appreciated as a musician. I still have his banjo. He gave me a banjo, a long neck banjo, which I think my son has. But I think that was the motivation. He really wanted to be accepted as a legitimate musician, which he was.
Do you remember? So he never told you he was going to leave, or why? You just realized one day he was not in the band anymore?
Yeah, no, I never knew why. I never knew why. And then, you know, the same thing happened with Michael. And then it was David, Peter, and Mickey, and Michael wasn't in the band. And I think probably his reasoning wasn't far different from Peter's. You know, he wanted acceptance as a legitimate musician.
Over the past, almost 60 years since Jason was born, I'm sure you've had encounters with Michael. Did you ever just sit and discuss the past and what happened and the repercussions and how it was raising Jason without him? And did you ever just have a heart-to-heart talk about the whole scenario?
No. Well, Mike is not one that you have a lot of heart-to-hearts. Jason saw him just last week. He was in town. He actually invited me through Jason to come and have dinner with him, but I couldn't that particular night because I was doing something else. And now I hear that from Jason that Mike that he smokes pot all day. So I don't know what kind of talk one could have with him.
Did Jason grow up a Monkees fan? Was he aware of the Monkees? Did he listen to their music? Did he have any questions about it?
It's funny that you say that because, no, when I had Jason, I never, ever put on the Monkees show because it was in reruns, on some channels. Because I didn't want, I remember thinking about Sean, that little boy who was pining away for his father, who he could only see on the TV screen. And I didn't want anything like that for Jason. So we never had the Monkees on, ever. Until he made the choice that he wanted to see some of the Monkee shows. That was fine. It was his choice.
What is his opinion of the music in the show?
I think he likes it. I think he thought it was pretty good.
Is it true that you're Magnolia Sims?
I am Magnolia Sims. That was my persona in London, Ontario, Canada, which was such an unhip city. And so I would go to I went to a school called the London Collegiate, which they call high schools collegiates. And then there was a different part of town, there was a school called H.B. Beale Technical School, something like that. And I would go hang out with the kids there, and I would tell them that I made up a name, Magnolia Sims, from way down North Carolina, honey, drinking mint juleps. But I could never keep up an accent, I just wanted to be somebody else. I was a teenager, you know what I mean? I was trying out different personas. So I came up with the name Magnolia Sims because I thought it sounded very Southern. And since I was supposedly from North Carolina, I had to have a Southern name.
So how did you impart this to Michael?
I actually remember telling Michael the Magnolia Sims story, about hanging out in the other part of town and everything. And he asked me if he could use that name for a song. He did not say it was about me, just that he wanted to use the name. I said, fine, go ahead. Now I think, in retrospect, I said, yeah, you can use the name if you give me a percentage. But I never thought of it.
What did you think of the song when you first heard it?
I thought it was a very nice song. I don't know it very well. So Magnolia sings as my little girl. I can't live without her. That's all I remember of the lyrics. But you know, I mean, it wasn't a big hit or anything. I did have one song that was written for me, which was "You Didn't Have to Be So Nice" by the LOVIN Spoonful.
Oh, is that about you?
Yes, it is. That is about me.
What's the story behind that?
Well, I knew Zal from Toronto.
Zal Yanovsky.
Zal Yanovsky. I met him when he was trying to bum quarters from me on the street. I had come out of a coffee shop called the DuPont Cafe in Toronto. And I was going to college at the time in Toronto, and I was walking from the restaurant to my rooming house where I was living off campus. And Zal just, you know, he just came up to me and said, "Hey, can you give me some quarters? I need some quarters." And he would, you know, I said, "No, go away. You're dirty and you smell." And
I believe you said you told me he had green teeth. Literally had green teeth.
well, he had fur on his green teeth. That's what he had. And you know, I think I told you by the time we got to my rooming house, you know, it was like I liked him so much and I trusted him immediately. I let him sleep in my room, but on the floor. And I said, "You can't go into my bed when I'm not here," because I had to leave in the morning to go to school. And of course, when I came home, he wasn't there anymore. He'd left, but he also left his furry green teeth marks on the pillow. So I knew that he got into my bed. After I told him, "No, you cannot get into my bed. You're dirty." In the end, I didn't care either. He was a wonderful guy.
When was the last time you saw David?
There was some event. I don't know, and he was there with us. I think her name was Jessica, but I'm not sure.
Yes, his wife was Jessica, yeah.
She was a horror show.
What was wrong with it?
He did not look very happy to me because I knew him quite intimately, you know, for that period of time, even though I hadn't seen him for a period of time. He just didn't look happy to me at all. And I don't know. Then I heard she was a horrible woman. But I didn't know her. I only met her at this event. I remember this event, and I think I actually took pictures, a couple of pictures of her and David. But I heard horror stories about it, so I personally did not witness it or know about it from personal experience, just what I heard.
Did Peter tell you about his cancer issues and so forth? Did you keep in touch with Peter?
Yeah, I kept in touch with Peter, but not that much. But we kept in touch mostly through email, occasional phone calls. I can't tell you how devastated I was when I heard that he was ill and then when he died. I haven't spoken to his wife, Pam, I think her name is, since Peter died. But, I was very sad because Peter was a kind, gentle guy. He helped a lot of people. That's why he went broke. Because some people, like Bobby Hammer, took great advantage of him. He gave Bobby thousands and thousands of dollars to buy camera equipment. They were going to do a movie, But I was very heartbroken when Peter died. I still think about him.
How would you describe how he touched your life?
He saved my life, I would say. Because when I found myself pregnant with no money, I had no money, I was getting no support from the baby's father. I needed a place to live. And Peter, invited me to live. He invited me to come and live at his house so they could all take care of me. because I was the first one of that bunch that had a baby. He was an angel. He was an angel masquerading as a monkey. But he really was just a wonderful guy, you know. Very generous, not just to me, to many people. Too generous. You know.
The inner relationships, like who were the best friends within the Monkees?
Well, Mike certainly was not a big fan of Peter's for a while. You know, he thought Peter was, I don't know, being used, which he probably was. He just didn't seem to like Peter. You know, I never thought of any of them as, none of them were really close to each other. I would say David was the most outgoing, you know, and most easily liked by people. Because he, you know, he'd been a performer, you know, pretty much all his life. But, you know, they all had their own set of friends. And, you know, they didn't really, except for, you know, events that were put together by managers or whatever, they didn't really hang out at each other's houses.
Did you ever catch any of them saying, you know, I can't take this pressure, you know, I have no time to myself, I'm too busy, I need a personal life, or were they just happy being Monkees?
Well, I obviously don't know what was going on in anybody's head, but I think that they were happy doing it because they had work. They had work, they were making good money, although Michael and David had the same you know, guy that handled their money, who stole from them and who set up David to be busted for pot. Only it wasn't David that got busted, it was Linda, his girlfriend at the time. Well, maybe she was his wife by then.
Yeah, no, there's a story where they got a call on the set one day that Linda was home alone and they came in and raided the place. But do you remember that?
I remember that, yeah. I remember it was Larry Spector. That was his name. Larry Spector was the money manager for both David and for Michael, and he robbed them both. So I don't know whatever happened to. And he tried to get me deported.
Nice guy. Do you remember? Do you remember a friend of his, David Pearl?
Sure.
What do you remember of David?
Well, I always thought David was a bit of a con jog. You know, actually, I got on my message here a couple of years ago. I got a couple of messages from him asking if this was my number. Did he get? But I never. And he left a number. I never returned his call. I thought David. You know, I mean, he and David Jones were friends. I don't know where they were friends from. I think David Pearl was from Texas, I think.
Yeah.
But there was something about David that I just didn't trust. I don't know. It's just a feeling, you know.